Welcome to NYLA 2020 On Demand. This session was previously recorded for the NYLA 2020 virtual conference. It is available to you through December 31st, 2020. Please note, once viewed, each on-demand program is eligible for 1 continuing education credit. Links to materials and presenter contact information have been archived in a Google folder. This folder will be made available after conference. Support files and documents can be found in the session files below the program description. Any questions about the NYLA 2020 virtual conference digital platform can be directed to Christina@nyla.org, or you can call 800-252-6952. Bringing Low Vision Services to Your Library is sponsored by SED, the New York State Library, LAR, and co-sponsored by RAS, SCLA, and CORT. Welcome to our presenters.
Welcome. My name is Sean Lemieux. I am the Associate Librarian and Director of the Talking Book and Braille Library in Albany, New York. Here with me today is Jane Bentley, our Senior Librarian.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jane. Thank you for tuning in to our session today. Sean and I will be describing some information about Talking Book and Braille Library services and giving you an overview of services. And then in the first half of our program, and then in the second half, we have Krishna and Alan here to share some information about VisionLabs.
Hi, Krishna Horrigan from Westchester Library System. I work as an outreach services programmer, and I'm one part of the VisionLabs project.
And I'm the other part. My name is Alan Houston, and I am the coordinator of the coordinator of services for special populations at the Grinton I. Will branch of the Yonkers Public Library.
Thank you. I'm going to talk to you today about the Talking Book and Braille Library. We provide accessible reading materials to patrons in the 55 counties of upstate New York. Our formats include Braille, digital talking books, and online resources.
So we wanted to share some background information with you so you can learn how the New York State Talking Book and Braille Library, otherwise known as TBBL, TBBL, is organized and how we serve our patrons. TBBL is a division of the New York State Library located in Albany, New York. That's where our collections are housed and our library offices are located. And we are also a regional library and a nationwide program coordinated by the Library of Congress's National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled, otherwise known as NLS. Through a partnership with NLS, TBBL circulates playback equipment and NLS-produced Braille and audio materials like books and magazines to thousands of patrons. There are over 50 network libraries in the US, at least one in every state, and New York State happens to have 2. Our library in Albany and the Andrew High School Braille and Talking Book Library in New York City. Our library in Albany serves eligible residents living in the 55 counties of upstate New York, which includes Westchester County and the counties north. And the Andrew High School Library serves residents living in New York City and Long Island. TBBL is a free lending library. We lend audio and Braille materials to residents living in our service area who have a visual impairment, a physical disability, or a reading disability. So if an individual has difficulty reading standard print, they are encouraged to apply for service. TBBL serves over 14,000 patrons of all ages, from very young children to adults. Our service is a lifelong membership, and it's transferable to another library within the NLS network. So if a patron moves out of our service area, we can help connect them to another Talking Book and Braille library. Our staff check out about 1,000 digital books on cartridge per day and about 300 Braille books per week, and we check in about that same amount. The majority of our patrons receive their books delivered through the US mail, while others choose to download their books through our free downloading service, and some do a combination of the 2. TBBL serves institutions as well. We serve institutions that serve our patrons and potential patrons. So institutions include public, school, and academic libraries, public and private schools, and health facilities like nursing homes and hospitals. We serve about 2,000 institutions.
I'm going to talk to you today about eligibility for service. Who is eligible for our services? People who have low vision, no vision, a physical disability, or a documented reading disability. For the documented reading disability, a patron has to have a signature by a doctor of medicine. And so during that process, they have to go to the doctor, get a signature, and then have our application certified. In the coming year, the National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled will not have that requirement in place. Therefore, it will be easier for people with print disabilities to apply for our service. Also, a little known fact is that people who can apply for our service are people who have temporary disabilities. I have a friend who broke their arms, 2 of them, and they were not able to read the printed word. So they were able to become a member of our service while they were recuperating from having 2 broken arms. You may be asking how you can apply for service. We have 3 sorts of applications. We have an application for youth, and that application is for ages 0 to 18. We have an application for adults, and that is from 18 and above. We also have an application for institutions. We have the people that can certify on the application are librarians and library staff, school counselors, ophthalmologists, social workers, registered nurses, and doctors of medicine. We would submit our application through the United States Postal Service, fax, or email. Eligibility for institutions. Institutions are eligible for our service, and the reason for that is because they serve people who also have disabilities. They serve our patrons. We actually ask for an institution to apply for the service and then have their patrons apply for our service. If a patron lives in an assisted living facility and they're only a part of the institution, when they move, their service will not be carried with them. So it's best to have both types of services. Agencies that can qualify for institution services are public libraries, schools and school libraries, colleges and college libraries, veterans facilities, healthcare facilities, correctional facilities, and patrons in prisons. It is good to designate one person as the contact person for an institution. They can be the leader of who and what and where and why and when and how they access our services, and then we will serve everybody in the agency. What happens next? Our reader advisors, they're basically our customer service people, will receive the application, date stamp it, and then put it into our computer. After that, they will call our patrons, including institutions, and explain the service and answer questions. Then they send an email to a patron if there is an email on the application, or they will send a welcome packet through the United States Postal Service. Please keep in mind that one of the things we are here for is to help. In any way we can assist, we are ready. Our phone hours are 9 to 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday.
So in this section, I will discuss the variety of formats and equipment that we can lend to our patrons, as well as the content available in our collection. Our patrons can select to read in the format that best fits their needs. So we can provide Braille books and magazines for younger and upper level readers. We also have a wonderful collection of print Braille books. Print Braille books are children's books with large print text and a Braille plastic overlay accompanying the large print text. These are great for sharing with sighted reading buddies. We have both children and adults learning and reading Braille borrow from this collection. Audiobooks and magazines on cartridge are very popular. We supply playback equipment if a patron chooses to read in this format. An audiobook on cartridge arrives in a thin blue plastic container, and it's actually pictured here in this image to the right. Patrons can open the container by unsnapping 2 plastic snaps, and inside is an audiobook on cartridge that is designed to fit naturally into the talking book player, which is pictured just to the left of the audiobooks. One end of the cartridge has a round finger hole, and the other end fits into the player in only one way. The design of the player and the audiobooks are streamlined, and they make them easy to navigate for our patrons. The flat side of the audio cartridge, the side that fits into the talking book player, is where our flash drive is located. So our audio cartridges are actually flash drives encased in plastic with digital files loaded onto the flash drive. And then the digital talking book player reads the files found on the audio cartridge. All of our materials ship free as free matter for the blind and handicapped. There is never a charge for our patrons. When a patron is finished reading a book, whether they've borrowed a Braille book or a book on cartridge, the patron can return the book for free. The patron can locate the address card found on the outside of the book's mailing case. And the one side of the address card reads the patron's address or the institution's address. And the other side of the address card reads our address in Albany, our library's address. So the patron can take the address card out, flip it over, and reinsert the card so it displays our library's address. And then that book can be placed in the mail. Patrons may also download their books through our free downloading service through the National Library Service. They have a program called BARD, which is Braille and Audio Reading Download. This program is helpful if a patron or someone assisting a patron can download their books. They do need the internet and a valid email address to get started. But if they can download, BARD provides access to every title in our collection in audio or electronic Braille or e-Braille formats. BARD is a password-protected service and requires a short online application to register. When an individual applies for service, we describe more about BARD, explain the benefits of BARD, and offer to help the individual register for the download service. We also provide support to patrons who need some help downloading after they've registered. Institution patrons are encouraged to register for BARD. It can be helpful for a staff member to create an account so they can become familiar with the service and possibly help a patron with questions. Patrons can download their books through the free BARD mobile app, available for iOS and Android devices. Patrons may also download the materials through the BARD website on a computer. The files will not play on a computer, but instead the files can be transferred to either a flash drive or a blank audio cartridge supplied by the patron. Then that flash drive or audio cartridge can be plugged into the talking book player and the patron can listen to their downloaded titles. This is helpful if a book is available on BARD, but a patron prefers to use the playback equipment over the mobile app, or maybe they do not have access to a smartphone or a tablet, but they do have access to a computer. They can still utilize BARD. TBBL also loans equipment and accessories to patrons for free, and if something malfunctions, we replace it at no cost to the patron. We lend a talking book player to patrons who are interested in listening to books and magazines on cartridge. The player is pictured here in this image. Institutions such as libraries may borrow a player or multiple players depending on need to be used for training and display purposes. So to give you an idea of size of the player, it's about 9 inches long, 6 inches wide, and weighs about 2.5 pounds. The players have a rechargeable battery, and they can be plugged in, making them convenient if a patron is traveling or they just want to bring the player from room to room. The player offers simple navigation utilizing large, brightly colored buttons. There are Braille indicators alongside each of the control buttons as well, and there are built-in audio instructions. So when an individual or a staff member at an institution receives their player, they can press any button on the player to learn about its functionality. We do provide large print instructions when we send a player to a patron, but it's nice to have the built-in audio instructions as a backup, and they're convenient. We also provide a high volume player for individuals with profound hearing loss. This player comes from the National Library Service and does require an additional application. That application asks for a medical doctor's signature because the player is quite amplified. We also provide headphones to patrons who would like a little bit of privacy when they listen to their books. The player does have a standard headphone jack, so if a patron does have their own set of headphones, they can certainly use those. We also have a breath switch available, so if an individual has limited dexterity where it makes it difficult to manipulate the player and press the control buttons, they can request a breath switch. It's an add-on to the player, and it allows the patron to manipulate the control buttons using their breath. We also provide download accessories for anyone downloading from Bard to a flash drive or a blank audio cartridge. We can supply a transfer cord or a USB adapter. As a regional library within the National Library Services Network, NLS selects and provides our titles, and we share them with patrons in our service area. So when a patron becomes a library member, they have access to thousands of fiction and nonfiction titles. From children's titles, we have young adult titles and adult titles. Patrons can select from popular subject areas like bestsellers, award winners, adventure, biographies, all kinds of different subject areas. It would be similar to a patron browsing their public library or their school library's collection. We also have a variety of magazine titles available, including several magazines for children. Patrons receive a magazine listing when they join the library, and then we can help them facilitate the subscriptions of those magazines. Patrons may request music scores and books about music from the National Library Service's extensive collection. In fact, it's the largest collection of its kind in the world. The resources include music sheets in both Braille and large print, as well as books about musicians and books about how to play an instrument. We also have foreign language materials, including titles in Spanish and French, as well as a limited number of languages or titles in other languages as well. And we do not have instructional materials, but if a student is looking, for example, textbooks, but if a student is looking for titles that they can use for class, we certainly have books that they could use for projects and then recreational reading. So in this section, I'm going to describe how a patron or an institution patron can borrow materials from our library. Many patrons choose to download their books through Bard or Braille and audio reading download. If a patron or someone assisting a patron can download, then Bard offers some really impressive benefits. Every title in our collection is available in audio or e-Braille formats, and all of our titles are simultaneous use, which means that the same book can be borrowed by the same patron, by multiple patrons at the same time. And there are no loan periods, so books do not have to be returned, and downloads will not expire from a device or computer. No matter how a patron accesses Bard, whether it's through the Bard mobile app or the Bard website, the service is compatible with accessibility tools like screen readers and voice-over technology. Another popular way to receive titles and magazines is to have them delivered through the US mail to a specific address. So these books are mailed from our library in Albany. There are two ways to receive books through the mail. Patrons can receive books on an automatic basis, where a computer system selects titles based on subject preferences in a patron's account. Available books are sent out based on those subject preferences. And then when a patron returns a book, they get another book. So patrons really like this model because they get a continuous flow of books on a variety of subjects, and they do not have to be concerned about selecting specific titles. As a patron's preferences change, we can edit their account to reflect those new interests. The other option is to receive books specifically. So patrons can contact our library and place specific requests with us, or they can access the online library catalog to place their own requests. Our online library catalog is a reflection of our physical collection. It's where a patron can view the availability of titles on our shelves. If a patron requests a book and it's available, then it will go out to that patron. If it's not available, it will be placed on a request list, and then when it becomes available, it will be sent out. Patrons receive a login to the online library catalog when they join the library, and institution members, such as libraries, would also receive a login. And this can be helpful so staff can become familiar with our catalog and possibly help a patron with questions. We typically lend 6 books to start to new individual patrons. And because the needs of institutions can vary, we like to reach out to the individual libraries to see how many books we can send, or just see how we can help in general. Our books are typically loaned for 30 to 60 days, depending on the book's length. But we really just want our patrons to be enjoying what they're reading. So if it takes someone a little longer to read something, that's perfectly okay. But we do ask if a book is not being used so that it is returned so we can share it with another patron. So I'll pass it to Sean so she can explain how patrons learn about new titles.
You might be asking yourself how you learn about new titles. The National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled has 2 publications that come out bi-monthly. The first is called Talking Book Topics. That publication contains all the new and recent digital talking books that are available in our collection. The Braille Book Review also does that, and it provides all the information about newer books in Braille. The wonderful thing about the Talking Book Topics is that it not only provides the books, it provides the title, the author, the annotation, the book length in hours, and it also provides for an exclusion category, which in our language means that if a patron does not want sex, language, or violence, we can restrict that for the patron's account. So every book has that exclusion at the back, at the end of the annotation. There are many benefits of membership to the Talking Book and Braille Library. Libraries can connect eligible individuals to accessible reading materials. We send promotional and display materials to anyone who asks for them. We have access to the entire collection. There are over 100,000 digital talking books and over 35,000 Braille titles. That doesn't include how many volumes we have. We also provide extensive training and support. When we support the Braille and audio reading download, we support patrons who are interested in titles. We basically function like a public library, but we're for people with low vision, no vision, reading disabilities, and physical disabilities. Additional resources. NSB Newsline is a free radio audio service for those who cannot read regular newsprint. Newsline offers access to newspapers, magazines, and other resources. Newsline can be accessed if you're a patron with us, then you can be a patron with Newsline. And they offer audio, you can go on the internet and read their items, and they offer audio newspaper. You can call into a 1-800 local number and listen to all of the newspapers. There's over 300 newspapers and over like 100 magazines. The other thing about Newsline I'd like to point out is that they have ads, circulars for Thanksgiving and all other holidays. They will read all of the coupons, and if the turkey is on sale to you. They also have a job list where you can put in your zip code and they will give you jobs by your zip code. And they also have the, my personal favorite feature is that they have the menu for TV on Newsline. So if you're missing a show or it got rescheduled sometime, you can go on there and put in your cable company and you can find what show you'd like to watch. Then there's the National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled. This is essentially the Talking Book and Braille Library's parent company. They supply a lot of our needs and we coordinate with them to provide the service. They offer help guides, bibliographies, and links to relevant organizations. One of the bibliographies that they currently offer is about the current political climate. If you are interested in the political climate, you can have a mini bibliography, and what that'll do is give you titles in Braille and digital talking books that you can take out and listen to and learn a lot. The next service is a statewide service called the Commission for the Blind. They assist New York State residents who are legally blind or deafblind to live independent and productive lives by providing vocational counseling, advocacy, rehabilitation training, and employment services. And the last service I'd like to talk to you about is called Bookshare. Bookshare is a service that any patron who applies and is eligible for our service is also eligible for Bookshare. How we do it is you apply for a library card to the New York Public Library, and they were gracious enough to pay for the service. Then you go and sign up for Bookshare with a code, and then you can listen to all of their offerings. Some of their offerings are textbooks, bestsellers, children's books, career resources, and more for individuals with reading barriers. Bookshare is a great resource. If we don't have a book here, and Audible doesn't have a book there, and so-and-so doesn't have a book there, we can go to Bookshare and see if they have the book. And oftentimes the bestsellers come out before they do here. One of the other things we do is resource and referral. We refer our patrons to agencies in their local communities that they can get to help them, and we actively have a reference librarian so that if a patron has a question that they don't know the answer to, they can call us and we will do research and we will find it. And if we can't, we know reference libraries at the state library in the same building and we'll get them to answer them. One of the people that we work with, actually two of the people we work with, are on this webinar. We'd like to turn this over to Krishna and Alan.
Okay. Okay, show my screen. Okay. So, thank you so much, Jane and Sean, for passing it over. Wonderful information about the Talking Book and Braille program. We've interacted with you a lot over the past few months, and every time I call the TBBL library, every time I call, I learn something new, and it's really just been a great partnership to foster. So I encourage anyone watching to feel free to reach out to them anytime. They won't bite. So to introduce this program, the second half of this workshop, we're going to be talking about the VisionLabs project that has been taking place down here in Westchester County. At the beginning, I introduced myself, but we'll do introductions again. I'm Krishna Horrigan. I work in outreach services at the Westchester Library System, and I've got my partner here, Alan Houston.
Hi, how you doing? My name, as Krishna mentioned, is Alan Houston, and I'm the coordinator of services for special populations at the Grinton-I-Will branch of the Yonkers Public Library.
Okay, so yeah, I'm going to start by just giving a little bit of a background on what we're going to cover. So we're going to give a bit of background on the project. We're going to talk about how we went about recognizing the need for vision services in our community. I'm going to go over connecting with stakeholders, the design of our program, and how you can kind of build your own accessibility program and future plans. So to start, I just want to say you're going to be able to hopefully, after sitting through this presentation, assess accessibility services in your area, whether that's vision related or related to another special population, and then also look for opportunities to leverage libraries to fill those service gaps. So those are your learning objectives for this workshop. While going through all of this information, keep in mind that while you're developing your services around these areas, you're also developing yourself professionally and building organizational connections that will pay off down the road. So that's something that will continually come back throughout this presentation. Okay, so I think first I'm going to pass it over to Alan to go over some of the needs that we're addressing.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think the germ of this idea for the Vision Labs project probably goes back at least about a year or two. It began with this basic proposition that it's the role of the public library to provide universal and equal access to information, but that older adults, especially those with visual impairments, are a chronically underserved population. They're also a growing population. The Census Bureau estimated that in 2018, there were 52 million people aged 65 and older in this country, with another 10,000 or so turning 65 every day. According to the 2018 American Community Survey, nearly 17% of the population of Westchester County, where Christian and I are located, was 65 and older. And with that, more than 15,000 residents self-reported vision loss severe enough to have difficulty reading just regular print material, even when wearing glasses. So, you know, for us, there was a clear sense that this was likely an issue of some concern for a significant portion of our patron base. And even before COVID-19, many of us had been concerned about the problem of social isolation that often attends aging and declining vision, with the experience of loss of independence and mobility and social connection, and the deleterious effects of all of these things on older adults. So, you know, the question for us then was twofold. What are the specific needs that must be addressed in order to mitigate this crisis of social isolation, and what can libraries do to address them? If public libraries are genuinely committed to equitable access to resources that support personal enrichment and community, but older adults with vision loss don't share the same degree of access as others do, any kind of program that we design should provide those patrons with services that can assure their continued use of library resources. And given that a full 80% of vision impairment and vision loss is avoidable, meaning that it's readily treatable or preventable in some way, such a program should also advocate and educate on the subject of eye health literacy. So with that in mind, you know, we set out to determine exactly who our target audience was, how we could connect with them, and what services they needed. In doing this, we knew we would need to gain, first off, a better understanding of blindness, low and declining vision, and also focus on the gaps in existing services for the visually impaired. So that was kind of our focus going into this, and I'll let Krishna talk about some of the stakeholders that we reached out to and some of the services and service organizations we connected with in building the program.
Yep, so stepping into a new service population can be intimidating, but there's a lot you can learn by going directly to the experts, directly to the source. In our case, service providers and community groups that focused on visual impairment, in Westchester County. So we reached out to a few contacts that we had already made for key informant interviews. And we asked them for explanations of their services, the population they serve, and the most pressing challenges for residents with visual impairment in the county. Each time we would also ask for suggestions on who to contact next. So you can call this a snowball method, which, oops, sorry, I had the window out of focus. A snowball method of interviewing, which has quite a few distinct benefits. So you gain a wide variety of perspectives, and you can start to build a service map in your mind as you're interviewing all of these people. You learn which demographics are most supported, which in our case would be younger residents with educational or vocational needs. You learn which demographics are being left out, older residents with social needs, especially if their vision is above a threshold of legal blindness. You learn a little bit about history. So we found that many of the social opportunities in Westchester County had kind of moved south to New York City where they could serve a wider population, which left out a lot of the older members of our community who couldn't get down there, especially if they had some visual impairment. And now, I mean, by doing these presentations, these interviews, you also make yourself a face or a voice, if it's a phone call, that they'll remember, and someone that they'll think of when they need information or a collaboration in the future. So remember that libraries are also key informants. You can ask around and see what others around you are planning or doing. You can also learn a lot by talking to your patrons, directly to patrons with low vision. In fact, many of the people that we interviewed for service purposes were, residents of the community, and they were able to talk to us from the perspective of a professional, but also the perspective of a patron who has visual impairment or has children with visual impairment. So if you can't think of an easy way to get in touch with a patron of yours who has visual impairments, then you could provide a survey for any patron who walks through the door or anyone that you serve. They might know of a family member or a friend who could provide feedback. We found that many seniors preferred low-tech solutions to everyday tasks that can help them maintain their independence. That was a big theme, independence. Something or someone to help them read their mail, write checks, or keep up with the news. Many senior centers, nursing homes, and libraries lack any kind of equipment necessary to help seniors with those things. And moreover, library spaces can often be disappointingly disorienting. As one person put it to us, the worst first impression for a blind patron is to walk into a space and find that there's no one there to help orient them. So aside from just talking outward, we looked inward as well and found that there were a few factors down in Yonkers that made them a prime partner for this project. So I'll leave that to Alan to describe.
Yeah, so at the time a lot of this was going on, the Grin and I Will branch of the Yonkers Public Library, there are 3 branches in the Yonkers Public Library system. The Will branch was in the process of developing a more robust senior services program. I was hired in February 2019 specifically to coordinate outreach services for special populations with a particular focus on older adults. And at the time, I think it was the first full-time position they'd ever had dedicated to senior services. So this was something that they were really committing to. There was already a limited homebound delivery service in place, and the initial goal was to expand its reach and establish it as a foundation upon which other services could be built. These could include events designed specifically for seniors, partnerships with outside agencies, both formal and informal, and adaptive technology for use both inside the library as well as for offered for circulation. The decision to focus on older adults was partly based on demographics. I think, we'd always had an intuitive sense that our core patron population skewed a little older. And this was actually subsequently borne out by a neighborhood naturally occurring retirement community grant, or a NORC grant, that was awarded to the city of Yonkers and the Westchester Jewish Community Services, specifically to serve this area surrounding the library. It's an area that is characterized by a high concentration of seniors aging in place, but it's also particularly problematic because they're concentrated in low density single family houses and low rise apartment complexes and apartment buildings without really ready access to robust public transportation networks. So, the NORC they actually worked through the city of Yonkers Office for the Aging but they proved to be a really important early partnership and model for us, insofar as it really showed us a way in which the library could provide a central, well-used location to host support services and programs, which is exactly what we're hoping to do ultimately with the VisionLab. But then the question is, what low vision services could we actually provide? Clearly, based on whom we were seeing come into the library and whom we connected with through the NORD program, there was a need for accessibility support services. But beyond a basic large print collection and an audiobook collection, we really had very little to offer. I think for a time, one of the things that we thought of very early was building up a Braille collection, which we didn't have previously. But in an instance, I think of a situation where discussions with actual stakeholders sort of change your perspective on what patrons want or need, what they actually want or need. We discovered that many newly blind adults never learn Braille because there are other adaptive technologies that are good enough that they don't need to. So really building an extensive Braille collection in your library just wouldn't necessarily be an especially valuable use of resources. The other thing is, one other thing about the Will Library is that we'd had something of a tradition of circulating objects. So we had a library of objects like ukuleles and telescopes and lawn bowling sets that you can come and check out for a period of time. And another thing we discussed early on was circulating kits of low-cost, low-tech assistive equipment, such as handheld magnifying glasses, page magnifiers, writing guides, talking clocks, calculators, playing cards, just a lot of household objects, assistive objects and devices. This would later become something that we had kind of thought about, but then became integrated directly into the VisionLab's project. But for that, I will let Krishna describe the actual program that we then developed.
Sure. So in outreach, we'd always tried to promote the Talking Book and Braille Library and the Talking Books player throughout our different outreach interactions, especially if we were dealing with older adults. And that referral stream was in some way a little bit of a seed for the VisionLab's program, in that it created this focus in our mind on hardware. Patrons have always valued the ability to have hands-on access to try out the device when showing them the Talking Book player. And I think that experience helps them realize and solidify that this is actually something that they could use. So hardware was an obvious pillar for VisionLabs. We decided to also place our hardware in 2 physical locations, one at the Westchester Library System headquarters in Elmsford, and the other at the Yonkers Grinton I Will Library, to create a situation where we would have 2 different sites, one a little bit closer to the northern half of the county and one that could serve the southern half of the county. Capitalizing on the space and the open nature of libraries, patrons would be able to come in, sample accessible hardware, use a desktop magnifier, and then be able to borrow some accessible devices as well to take home and try. And within the sites, they would be able to try these things out in relative privacy, in that we would have an area that they could use so that if they were coming in to read something like personal letters, they could have an expectation of privacy on the magnified screen. Also, by having these sites available in the libraries, we would have staff who could help and guide them through using the devices, teach them how to use them, teach them about the devices available to them for purchase if they wanted something like this at home, and also to tell them about local services. Education and referrals were really the 2 other pillars of the program, representing development efforts aimed towards both the patrons and library staff. Beyond simply placing that desktop magnifier there, we wanted to make sure people could use it. We wanted to make sure the staff knew what it was, that the staff could use it, and that staff is also key to providing some of those small accessibility tips about using your smartphone or a tablet or your own personal computer with some of its accessible features. So that would be another part of the education that we would bring. More generalized education efforts would center around public programs, internal professional development workshops, and a persistent VisionLab's website that would house recorded presentations, relevant resources for our residents. And we created a mission statement that would help us keep track of our goals, and more importantly, would help us describe the project to others. So we encourage anyone who's trying to go down this route to also come up with a kind of mission statement. For us, it's the mission of VisionLabs is to provide tools and training that supports older adults experiencing a loss of vision or motor skill that impacts their ability to read. Our aim is to keep our patrons reading for a lifetime. So that reading for a lifetime part is really our selling point. That's how we connect it to the libraries, and that's how we keep ourselves going. Here's a screenshot of our website. You're welcome to visit it on your own time. It's just a spot where we localize and centralize some of our resources. And you could make this a page on your website, on your library's homepage. You could make it a social media page for people to follow. Really, however you can get some of this information out through another stream and draw people into your library or your site where they can try out some of the hardware. Speaking of hardware, these are some of the devices that we had in mind for our VisionLab. So one would be a desktop magnifier where you can place reading materials under a camera. These are often called CCTV magnifiers, and it would offer contrast settings where you could try different contrasts and see, with certain visual impairments, certain settings would be easier to read. There are some of these on the higher end that will also do text-to-speech. So that was one kind of centralized piece of tech that our VisionLabs would be built around. But aside from that, there are also handheld magnifiers. There are all sorts of accessories like large print calendars, wide line paper, dots that you can put on your devices at home. And we would want to showcase and if possible, hand out some of these pieces of hardware as well. So another note about accessible tech, it's expensive. Money is always a limiting factor, but there are two things that helped us and could help you. So we searched out and found a small grant to help us purchase hardware. And on top of that, with some of our connections that we made in that interviewing process, we ended up getting some hardware donations. We were very fortunate to be selected by the Field Hall Foundation in Westchester as a partner for extending low vision resources in the county. The foundation already provides some funding for the primary vision service in our county. So, if you're looking for a grant, do a little bit of market research, see who's slinging around money already, and they might be able to help you fund some of these purchases. During our chats with accessible tech specialists, we found out that one of those groups just happened to have a spare desktop magnifier, albeit one without text-to-speech capabilities, but it was available for donation. They were looking to get rid of it, and we jumped in there, and we're happy to have a device to test out for ourselves and kind of plan around. The New York State Commission for the Blind was also incredibly helpful. They donated some accessories like wide line paper, bold markers, and signature guides. So once again, this is another benefit to making your intentions known to stakeholders and letting them know that you're interested in collaboration and donations. You can be cheeky about it. So all of that was our plan. That was our grand plan. Of course, you're watching this video right now. You know that COVID-19 happened. 2020 has been a year. So I'm going to pass it over to Alan now to talk about how that impacted our intentions with this program and guided our eventual launch.
Right. So this was the plan, right? I mean, we'd come up with this plan, and we had developed a basic timeline for putting all the pieces in place and getting everything together, and then COVID-19 hits. So just like everybody else, we were forced to really fundamentally reassess the VisionLabs project in light of the state-mandated pause amid the pandemic. like all libraries, we lost access to our physical spaces, and the idea of in-person instruction and programming, which was really kind of the bedrock of the project, just became an impossibility. So we immediately delayed our official summer launch, and which was to be for this previous summer, and put on hold acquiring equipment that we had identified, and started to think about how we could move our content to a remote delivery model. Rather than relying on this one-on-one support and instruction, which had been the basis of the project as originally conceived, we would focus instead on facilitating online presentations for library staff and patrons. Quarantine actually also introduced some pretty interesting and unexpected benefits to virtual programming. We were, from our work in other areas, we were really quickly becoming very familiar with the technology we needed to put together online presentations. We also found that it was suddenly much easier to schedule guest speakers without having to worry about travel time and arrangements like that. And perhaps more importantly, with everyone basically at home all the time, we had an essentially captive audience for these things. Naturally, the VisionLab's website took on a more direct role for hosting our presentations and directing people towards local resources, especially those related to socialization, which was particularly important during the quarantine. So really, in these past 6 months of this, even as our library spaces have slowly started to reopen, our virtual VisionLab has really supplanted the idea of actual physical vision labs, as a physical space in importance, effectively becoming the foundation upon which all of our educational, instructional, and referral service rest. I mean, the VisionLab's website is our primary mode of outreach at this point. And that's been a really interesting process to be a part of. And I will bring it back to Krishna to let him talk about some of the results that we found and some of the next steps that we're thinking about.
Okay, oops.
Oh.
Hang on, where were we? Okay, next slide. Okay, so yeah, with our results and next steps, so far we've reached more than 100 people through our digital programs, and we intend to continue providing virtual programs about eye health, vision resources, and maintaining independence. Now, our future programs will also be aimed towards staff across all of our Westchester libraries, leveraging the stakeholder contacts that we've made to stimulate discussion about what can be done to serve patrons with visual impairment and declining vision. Our long-term goal is to use this campaign as a launching point for a broader push for accessibility, especially as these libraries are starting to reopen and think about how their space is laid out. So with those libraries reopening, we hope that they remain open. We can once again start to look at acquiring hardware for our in-person sites. We put that on freeze, but we had started building quotes before everything went on pause. So we're looking at acquiring those devices and beginning to set up the sites, keeping sanitation and safety in mind. That would give us another opportunity to reach people in person once again, to invite people into the libraries once they're safe. And armed with the knowledge and connections that we've gained, I think we're ready to jump into that extra layer of education and referral that you can get with a sit-down location. Opening a dialogue around vision has brought us closer to other organizations in and around Westchester County. Connecting with the Talking Book and Braille Library has been incredibly helpful, as I said before, when trying to inform patrons about the service. So making that connection has very much enriched our referrals, and that we can tell people not just that this exists, that it's for them, but we can tell them some of the details about what to expect. And that's true of other referrals as well. Vision's services for the blind in Rockland County, they serve Westchester County. We can tell people more about the referral stream of how they can receive services from them, how they can receive services from the Commission for the Blind. This has also led to our libraries connecting with us more. The visibility of our project and our program in mailing lists, in programs, in communications to these member libraries around Westchester County has had them contacting us to learn more about TBBL, but also learning more about local services. So we had a library recently who contacted us because they had a newly arrived deafblind patron who had just moved to Westchester County, and they were looking for social connections and service connections. And we were able to connect that library and that patron with some of the organizations around us to find some support. So let people know that it's a priority, and they will think of you when those partnership opportunities arise. During one of our virtual programs, the executive director of Visions shared that in 2008, the Healthy People 2020 project reported that nationwide, only 3% of eligible people were accessing vision rehabilitation services. So in 2017, that number had only risen to 4.3%, and the goal for 2030 is 6% served. That might sound like an incredibly low number to you. It certainly did to us, and it stuck with us. So we're realizing that for service providers around us, one of the most significant roadblocks that they experience is marketing, getting the message out about their services. So these organizations serve large areas, wide demographics, leaving little time and budget for that type of work. The libraries, by contrast, are an essential signal booster. We have the potential to reach not only the types of clients that they're looking for, but the friends, family, coworkers, acquaintances, bosses of these people. So embracing that role, especially in these unprecedented times, will remain a challenging and rewarding focal point for our activities down the road. But no matter what, that idea of, I guess, coalition building will continue to guide us. And it's certainly, I think, a central theme that you should keep in mind if you're trying to implement a service or service model to reach patrons with visual impairment, or really any other special group. So thank you so much for sitting through this presentation. If you have questions, please reach out to any of the presenters, the Talking Book and Braille Library, the VisionLab's presenters. We have all of our contact info on this page, and I'll leave it to that. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. This concludes the NILA 2020 on-demand program, bringing low vision services to your library. We hope you continue to take advantage of all the on-demand and live programs the NILA 2020 annual virtual conference has to offer. Thank you so much for helping us make this the best virtual conference ever.